This podcast is made possible by Planful. Among the FP&A rank and file, there's one clan, unlike any other when it comes to capturing moments of strategic insight. Welcome to Planning Aces. On today's show, we'll be featuring the FP&A insights and commentary of 4 planning aces, including CFO Claire Bramley of Teradata, CFO Sandra Rowland of Xylem, CFO Anna King of Mesh Payments, and CFO Pat Dillon of Flock Freight. This is Jack Sweeney, your co-host, along with top consultant Steve Blair, who will serve as co-host and resident thought leader as we seek to highlight the takeaways from our distinguished group of planning aces. We begin after this. With so much change around us and your need for increasing agility, you have to equip your team to win, and you have to do it now. Join over 1,300 companies of all sizes using Planful to help plan and execute with greater confidence. Planful integrates your critical financial processes to serve the data you need, insights you demand, and the answers necessary to manage your business optimally. Planful lets you plan better, close faster, and report more accurately. And Planful's not just for finance and accounting. It's for the entire business to plan, collaborate, and drive increased financial performance. Take full control of how you administer and manage all of your financial processes and data. And put finance first collaboration at the heart of every decision. When finance is a team sport, you can be a champion. With Planful, you'll be a champion of finance. Get in the game by going to planful.com to learn more. Hi, it's Jack Sweeney, and I'm here with Steve Blair. Steve, I'll point out to you up front here, and maybe it occurred to you already as well, but this episode of the 4 Planning Aces 3 are women finance leaders, and only one man finance leader. In the past, that's been reversed for a typical episode. Usually it's just one woman finance leader. I think during September, we certainly had some impressive women finance leaders participating with us. We had quite a few women finance leaders participating with us, so certainly there were more to choose from. I do think it's a step in the right direction in terms of achieving greater balance. Any thoughts?
I will tell you, Jack, from my own personal experience, the best manager I ever worked for was a woman. So I have great respect because I have been my career has benefited dramatically from having some great women to serve as examples and to help lead. And I think the 3 that we've got as part of this 4-person episode are excellent leaders, and I'm looking forward to share the lessons that they're going to have for us.
Yeah, and did you find maybe a thread that runs through their commentary, maybe a theme that they shared?
I think of our 4 speakers today, it's really thinking about the overwhelming amount of data that's in organizations and how do you get your arms around that? How do you simplify that in something that you can work on? And then how do you extend it, getting out of finance's historical backward-looking batch mode of thinking into a much more forward-looking, proactive, predictive kind of approach? And how do we shift that? And what are people really doing at companies that show us evidence, that give us ideas that we can all take and use back at our own companies?
Okay, then. Well, let's tee up our first planning ace, who will be Claire Bramley, CFO of Teradata. Now, Claire stepped in to the CFO office at Teradata in June 2021 after a 14-year career at HP, where her last role was as global controller for all of HP. Sizable job. What she's about to relate is that she began in Europe, really. She began actually in the UK. She is sent to Switzerland during her career. She gets sent to Palo Alto. She has a period at Palo Alto. And I believe the anecdote she shares here, Steve, is when she returns to Europe as head of EMEA finance, overseeing the finance function for all of EMEA. Uh, she relates this experience, and I just thought it was terrific, one you'll enjoy. Here is Claire Bramley, CFO of Teradata, looking back at a chapter at HP.
Several years ago, a strategic moment for me actually came out of a mistake, which not many people talk about. I think it's really important to we're not all perfect, we all make mistakes. So I remember I was in Geneva at the time, and I remember doing some work with the sales team. I was supporting a lot of the European business leaders there, and they're salespeople. They're salespeople, they're good sellers. And I remember going through the data and analyzing the data, and they kind of given me a story of like explanations as to why something wasn't what we were expecting it to be. And I remember taking their explanations on face value and not digging down to the next level of detail. And then I remember coming back to this maybe a month later and realizing the error of my ways. And I think a strategic moment for me is let the data tell the story. And I think that's probably why I've ended up at a data and analytics company, because as a finance leader, if the data is telling you something, keep asking the questions. If the answers that you're getting from the people and the data are not matching, there's a reason for that sort of thing. So it was a learning early on to say, let the data tell the story. Keep pushing on the data. So if I'm unsure of something today, I will just keep digging into the data. I won't just keep grilling questions. I think in the past, I just would have kept asking people questions. Now I'm like, let's just look at the data. Let's see what the data tells us, and then we can make the right decision. And that was a big strategic moment for me, because people like to influence, persuade, sell. And I think, a strategic moment is listen to the data. And if the data is not clear, keep digging into the data. And that stayed with me ever since. And as I said, now I'm at a data company, which is great. And I'm surrounded by people who have this similar mentality. So we're kind of data freaks here at Teradata, just because we know that's what gives you the insights. That's what gives you the answers, even when it's complex. That was a bit of a strategic moment for me, in the sense of I went more with the persuasion and the narrative and the commentary that people were telling me. And I didn't ignore the data, but I didn't dig into it as much as I could or should have at the time. And I think we made a decision that we ultimately had to correct and adjust, because the data was continuing to tell us that we should have maybe taken a different path.
Wow. I have to say, I really loved this anecdote. There was so much that it touches on. And one of the phrases that stuck with me was the alternative narratives. And this is something finance has dealt with for quite some time. Now that there's so much data available for finance to sort of validate narratives with, it's game changing in a way. But finance leaders need to begin thinking about data differently if they're going to leverage. Steve, what did you make of what Claire shared?
Well, I love starting with this one, Jack, because I think there's a lot of richness here. There's a lot of lessons I think if you pay attention, you can take away and learn. Number one is Claire's willing to own up to a mistake. If you don't learn from your mistakes, you're condemned to repeat them over and over and over again. So she gives us one that she's clearly learned from, and I think she's absolutely the right CFO for Teradata, because having learned what she just disclosed to us puts her in the right company for that. But I think FP&A people, the reason I'm happy to start with this clip is FP&A people in general are faced with a situation where in today's world, data's everywhere. There's a sea of information out there. And so the only way to plot your way through it is to try to have some kind of hypothesis about what it means. And we talk about the sales pipeline and the algorithm of the business and how things move through. Those are assumptions that you've made about how your business works. You've got to have so many leads to have so many sales calls convert to so many sales. It have its average size. The whole math of all your plans are made on those assumptions. And what you're trying to do is to see that does the data validate that? And if it doesn't validate that, then there's something wrong with your story. There's something wrong with your understanding, or there's something wrong with the business. It's changing numbers. So you got to listen to the data. I've often heard of variance explanations being described as elegant excuses. Many people are good at elegant excuses as to why they didn't hit a number or why it's not so bad. And the reality is, as Claire points out, is there's data's telling you, it's talking to you. And rather than try to probe them and get to that, just keep bringing back, okay, the data's telling us this. The data doesn't seem to validate what our assumptions are. What is it telling? The data's speaking to you. If you can be smart enough to be patient and look at it and analyze it and really get into it, and just keep looking for that. If you think about it, everything in our business is about setting an objective of where we're trying to go, building a plan of activities to get you there, and then going out and executing. And as you go out and execute, you track your actions to see if it's happening the way you thought it's going to happen. If it is, great. If it's not, what are you going to do instead? If you're going faster, how do you take advantage of that? If you're going slower, what are you going to do to compensate? And that's essentially the role of FP&A in totality: is know the goal, have a plan to get there, track the actuals, and then replan whenever you drift off course. So it's a great quote to look at. It reminds me of early in my career, I had a chance to go hear Dr. W. Edwards Deming in his famous 4-day seminar. And Deming was favored for a quote that works really well here. He says, and I'll try to say it in his gravelly voice: "In God we trust. All others need to bring data." And so just keep that in mind. Trust in God, make everybody else bring data.
Well, for our next planning ace, I say let's feature our one male representative this episode, CFO Pat Dillon of Flock Freight. Now, Pat was a Morgan Stanley investment banker for a good number of years. Listen to that episode. Interesting background, interesting insights. He wanted to come out and do something innovative. He stepped into a CFO role at a company specializing in self-driving truck technology. Really interesting story there, as well as at Flock Freight, which is a logistics company. Interesting concept. Won't go into it here, but an intriguing career, and one that is really following the data innovation trail.
Well, I think I like Pat's. From where we are, we've got a lot of sea of data. As Claire pointed out there's lots of data. Let the data tell you. But if you're like a lot of finance people, there's so much, you're overwhelmed.
Don't you, excuse me for interrupting, don't you have a workshop or something coming up, Steve? I'll give you an opportunity here for a plug.
We're at a webcast on September 30th. We've got a workshop on November 2nd and 4th to show people how to get to more impactful reports. One of the key points we're making there is don't confuse exploration of data, figuring out what you've got, with explanation of data. Okay? Reporting is about explaining what you found and what it means. Exploring is trying to figure out what is the data telling you. Those are two different things. When I'm exploring, I want to look at a lot of different things and see if my understanding of the relationships is matched up by the results that we're seeing. Once I've figured that out, or if I have a hypothesis about what I think it's going to happen, I want to put that down, and then I want to explain exactly what I see in terms of the algorithm, in terms of how the business works and how it goes forward. You see that, you get overwhelmed. The key point that Pat makes is really how do you get started, and that's his point. We'll let him make it and then talk about it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I have like that one moment, but a series of moments where maybe it's because I'm not that quick of a learner and it just takes me multiple times for it to drill into my brain, but it's really about simplicity. If you ask people to focus on 10 different metrics or 10 different things to do, it's very hard to make those trade-off decisions that everyone has to make, whether that's allocating capital, setting a budget, or just somebody personally trying to figure out on your team where he or she is supposed to spend their time. If you're trying to optimize around 10 different variables, it's very difficult. And so the more as a leader you can think about what is the one metric that we are trying to drive improvement on, it gives a clarity of purpose. So that could be something as simple as revenue growth. It could be something like free cash flow growth, but helping to give a North Star for the entire organization and keeping it simple. And then everything is sort of a derivative off of that North Star. So if it's revenue growth, okay, how many sales leads do we need to get? What kind of capital allocation do we need to have into a marketing organization or into a sales organization? You start to understand and translate all of these other decisions into how are we going to drive that single metric. Now, that's overly simplistic, and sometimes it doesn't work that way, and it needs to be a little bit more nuanced. But the more you can get people focused on a single metric or a single mission that is measurable and verifiable, the more you can get people all sort of rowing in the same direction. And that's, something that I was cognizant of as a banker and certainly as a CFO. I've seen that as I think about not only my own team, but getting our organization, when you start to focus on financial metrics, what's the one thing that really matters that's really stage appropriate, especially for companies that are growing, is really important. And trying to decide what that is and how you're going to measure it is, once you kind of figure that out, the rest is really just execution.
Okay, Pat Dillon of Flock Freight. Interesting digital logistics and shipping company. Yep.
I think Pat gives us some good advice, particularly if you're overwhelmed. If you're overwhelmed, simpler way is just think about what is the most important thing that we didn't think of. If you think about Stephen Covey said, what's the first thing? You got to do the first things first. Well, what is the one? What Pat said, basically advice is, what's the one thing? What is the thing that makes sure our company's successful? Is it the growth? Is it cash flow? At any given point, say, and that thing will change over time as your business matures. But it's very important that while the thing is there, you focus on the thing and you don't get distracted by all the other things that could come at you. It's really interesting. Early in my career, I spent a lot of time working at Taiwan Semiconductor, TSMC, and they are acknowledged as the best company on the planet at the manufacture of semiconductor chips. I had the privilege to sit down with one of their senior executives we were working for, and we were just having a conversation, and I remember it distinctly. He said, "Steve, you got to understand, we're really good because we do one thing. We make chips. We manufacture. We don't design them. We don't market them." Intel, who was another huge company and very successful there, they had to think about all that stuff. All we got to think about is how do we make it? And because all that brain power is focused on that one thing, they can get really, really good at the one thing. And as a company, from a planning point of view, if you're not good at anything, that's the companies that wash out because they're just not good at anything. There's nothing they can handle. But companies that find their ability to be good at one thing and know how to execute that, they tend to earn a customer following. They tend to, match that up, and they tend to be successful. So his whole focus on really finding the North Star, finding the one thing and pointing everything toward that is a great way to get started. And certainly after you've mastered that thing, then you might be able to look at some other things, or you might see how that thing begins to relate with other things. But it's really moving everything forward. I used to have a boss, the head of the division, and he was famous for leaving these emails out to all the managers, and he would give us another A priority. And it was almost comical. He said, we got too many A priorities, and he's giving us another one. If your boss is somebody that just keeps giving you A priorities, I look at that as kind of thinking about a table. You only got the table represents, I use in my presentation, sometimes I'll represent a table, and the table represents 168. 168 is the magical number. It's the number of hours in every week. Every human on the planet has 168. They don't have any more. They don't have any less. And if you visualize that as your table, when you start setting down your priorities on top of that table, if you get too many A priorities, you got a pile on the table, and at some point the stuff starts falling off. Is what falls off the most important thing to fall off, or just the first thing to tip? If you're not prioritizing and focused on your one thing, everything starts falling off, and it just gets chaotic. So Pat does a real good job. Focus on kind of keep it simple, keep it that one thing, start there and go from there. Real good friend of mine, Philip Campbell, wrote a book on planning, on how a guide to financial planning. His whole thing is planning is very simple. It's just P times Q. Price times quantity leads most plans to be, that's how you put plans together. You ask Phil a question, what happens if you don't know one of those? Well, then you just go back to the one number. You just go back to the one number. So when you really think about it, think about the one thing that you're really going to drive forward with, and then you learn from there.
Meanwhile, financial analysts out there, take note. Pat Dillon, I noticed, posted a finance analyst position opening on LinkedIn today. He was circulating some hiring a number of positions, I believe. You might want to check that out on LinkedIn. And of course, listen to his episode as well. Just some of the added value, Steve. We bring our planning aces. Yes, we do. And our next planning ace is Sandra Rowland of Xylem. Now, Xylem is not a small company. I had not heard about it before. It's a $5 billion company, quite sizable, specializing in water technology. Sandra Rowland came up the finance ranks at Kodak, where in the 2000s, she was helping valuing their licenses for some of the camera technology that was being licensed to smartphone manufacturers. Sandra Rowland, at that time, was either the head of FP&A or their top FP&A guru, was seated at that table. That's who they wanted there. Just a great career chapter that she shared with us on her recent episode. Let's listen to what Sandra also told us about metrics that are top of mind.
And 10 years ago, I can't imagine having sustainability metrics getting discussed on a regular basis in an operating review. That has changed. From a finance professional, some of the foundational work that we continue to do, whether it's, setting budgets or setting the long-term plan, none of that has changed. But certainly the tools that are available to us as finance professionals, that is changing at record speed. And, I think it's all about getting quicker information to data so that you can help your business partners drive insights. So, what we're always after as a finance organization is to spend less time gathering the financial information and compiling it, and more time trying to drive insights to help our business partners and our enterprise to grow profitably forward.
That's a good place to stop, Jack. Sandra does a real good job of articulating what FP&A teams and every company I've ever worked with always face. What do we spend our time on? What are we really working on? And the problem heretofore has always been we spend all our time gathering up the data. If we have a large enterprise with lots of different divisions, we're sending out budget instructions or strategic plan instructions, and then we're gathering up all those parts. And we're doing a whole lot of data gathering and sorting out. Do we got everything? Does it reconcile? And the parts fit together and everything? And the problem is, that in the old world had to be done. It just takes away, again, comment earlier, we have 168 hours every week. It takes away. If we're doing that, we're not doing the real planning work. We're not thinking about how do we close the gap and how do we work with the different groups. So the real trade-off is really what we're dealing with. And as Sandra mentions, the expanding metrics, There's still a lot more stuff we get asked about. Sustainability is huge, particularly if you're a global company. Sustainability is just part of operating in today's world with climate, with everything that's happening. That's just something you got to start figuring out how to measure. In the old days of just measuring the financial results by themselves tell you nothing. The physical measures that create the financial results are all about what has to happen and how those are changing and how everything happens. That's how plans really come together.
Steve, Sandra also shared a few thoughts on looking forward. So let me share those comments with you as well.
I think one thing that we've learned for sure is that the next 12 months is a longer period than we used to think about it. So I think over the past few years, we all learned that we had to be extremely nimble, even when we're thinking out just 12 months. Then I'd say the number of unexpected challenges that have been thrown at our teams is just incredible. And so, I'm going to be working to delivering how we deliver on those goals, and all the actions that we need to take to move the enterprise forward.
So I thought she summed up nicely this current environment that we've been hearing finance leaders tell us is just filled with unexpected events.
Today's environment, you set a plan, it's changing even before you got to the beginning of the year. So you just need to get in this continuous mode. I'm always adjusting, constantly being agile in terms of where we're headed. And if you can put that mindset to planning, keep everything looking forward, constantly updating, still got the history, still tracking to see what the capabilities were and how we've expanded. So we're still keeping up with how we've already transformed the ship and where we're trying to get to, but we're still moving toward the vision of what it has to become to fully realize our goals and dreams. And that transformation process, that's what FP&A is really becoming, is people that are constantly working on the transformation.
Steve, we're up to our final planning ace, Anna King, CFO of Mesh Payments. Her episode was posted only just recently, number 836. This particular clip, she's looking back in time at her last CFO tour of duty, where she actually spearheaded the move to real-time data. And here she's discussing how she goes about integrating the data, but there's much more here. So this is, again, who is Anna King, CFO of Mesh Payments.
At my prior company, I connected our production data. It was a payments company. So I connected our production data, our accounting data, and our sales pipeline data. And we connected it, and we were able to see real time how much revenue we had made that day or that month to date. And we were able then to connect that pipeline data to forecast what the rest of the month would look like. And so that gave the management team a lot of great insights on where to focus their time and their energy. Maybe a specific customer wasn't doing as well as we had predicted, and to really dig in and see what we could do to fix that. Or maybe there was a specific industry that was growing much faster than we anticipated. How do we put more resources to that specific segment? And so, I think the finance organization within the last 10 years, right, has really changed and is really now responsible for the data of the company and to make sure that they are helping the rest of the organization understand that data and to provide the tools to make quick decisions and execute on what the data is telling you.
Jack, I think this is really, you think about it, Anna's given us a good mantra for how you need to think about FP&A as we go forward. You think about it, who wants batch mode? Who wants waiting on monthly financial statements? I mean, the management team's trying to deal with the now. And by what they were able to do to convert and look at their real-time metrics, they're in the month predicting what the month end's going to be. If you're running short or you see an opportunity to run long, you want to know now. You don't want to wait 2 or 3 weeks after the month end to find out that was happening. But the ability to know now and to predict gives you a chance to change it. If it's not going the way you want to, what are you going to do to bring it back up? If it's running hard, how are you going to take advantage of it? So that is the mode we're all moving to. Is so much of our world where we're all dealing with phones and all kinds of ways of really dealing with faster ways of doing things. That's a faster management. That's what an FP&A team's got to go, where we're looking at that module, and as soon as we get data, we're updating it. How do I update and predict year end and what the month end's going to be? Well, I know what my leads are. I know what my close ratios are. I know what's scheduled. I know how many days I have left. All that stuff is, the future is foretold by what you've already done, what you've already, the end of the harvest is based on how the crops are growing now. You can screw it up, but you can't make them grow anymore. And so in this situation, business, you do have the ability to grow, to make it grow more. You can go find some more salespeople or go find some more leads in terms of what's out there. So again, it's all about getting to real-time management. And that's where we're going. The companies that pull this off are really going to be in a position to really help things change more than anything else. She also poses right there at the end of that clip. She also gives us something I think is very, very powerful. I want to highlight and illuminate, where she talks about in the last 10 years, the role of finance, the finance organization has really changed. It's really now responsible for the data of the company. I'd like everybody in finance to think about that. We're responsible for the data of the company. By that, I mean, we don't collect it, but we're responsible for helping interpret what it means to whether or not we're achieving our plans or objectives, what it means to how well we're executing, what it means in terms of opportunities to get better. If we take that role using the data, remember we talked about data, you got to tell, what does the data tell us? Using what it tells us to help the business get better, that's a very powerful forward-looking role. I know a lot of people are worried about finance getting replaced by robotic automation and things like that. The transaction part of finance, the gathering of data, the pulling everything together, so not that mechanical work a computer can do, but it can't think as fast as people can. It can't ask the right questions. We might be able to use the computer to help us answer the questions, but that's the role we're moving into of really becoming the people that know how to use data to answer the right questions. And that's a powerful future.
The question, we'll hear her other comments here that she shared in response to a question I was asking her. How did she actually set this new mindset within the organization? How did she get people thinking differently? And she immediately goes to change management, Steve, which I think you were touching on. But here's what she said. And again, we're going to catch her just at the front of the sentence here.
Change management is always, typically very difficult. And so I think, you really have to do a good job of selling, the reason and the rationale behind, why you want to implement these types of systems. So I had to get the CTO on board, right? Because I needed to borrow a dev resource, which is, as I'm sure we're all aware, is really hard to attain. And so I had to convince him that it was worth it, that it would help the business grow. I had to convince the CRO that by connecting the sales pipeline, his team would have better visibility. He would be able to communicate the success of his team better to the management team and to the board. And then also the implementation team, right? So they could understand how their teams are doing and give them the tools and resources and really help tell their story to the management team, right? So a lot of times there was this, hey, we have too many customers in the pipeline, we need more resources, right? And I was able to show through these dashboards that maybe that was the case and help get them the resources that they need. So I do think it's a matter of how you tell the story, how you communicate, how you build that consensus. And ultimately, I think, really understanding how the business is performing real time, that's going to be the argument that will win, in my opinion, 100% of the time. Who wouldn't want to understand the areas of the business that are doing well and the areas that might not be doing well and really focus on improving those?
Okay. So it's similar to Claire Bramley's point about having the data tell the story. As the sales team approached her and wanted more resources for these customers, that was sort of anecdotal information. She was like pointing to the dashboard. No, look at the dashboard. It bears out what you're telling us. There's new customer activity. We can help you get those resources. The real-time data was there.
Yeah. And Anna basically pulled that in and said, hey, how do I change manage? I change by partnering. All her conversations are trying to win a senior executive over to partner. Loan me that development resources to help pull this together because it'll help us know what we need to do. Help us pull that data together so we can tell the story of the pipeline and where we're going and what we're going to do and what the results are going to do. So her whole thing is to take that data and it's not a finance thing. It's not this versus them. It's something we're doing collaboratively with the business. When I say finance owning data, we can only own it if we can work collaboratively with the people that we're supporting. Okay, we're helping them. It's not us win, they lose. It's us help figure it out together. And they have some ideas about what they're trying to do. They're trying to get some more resources. Let's go through the business justification. Let's show how that works. Let's show how these things go. And so that she gets to that change management by a deep degree of partnering. She also gets there by storytelling. If the storytelling is just making a more entertaining discussion of where are we trying to get to, what is this really telling us, and how does the data support that story? The thing about storytelling I always get concerned about is finance is supposed to be the people that are fact gatherers that tell the truth and everything. Well, if we're storytellers, you got to make sure the data, you got to make sure the facts are still there to support whatever it is that you're presenting, and you have to let the story from the data tell itself.
Yeah, I just keep on coming back to that conference table where, again, Claire Bramley said in the past there were all these eloquent narratives that were so powerful because people are very persuasive. And finance needs to be just as eloquent, just as aligned with that data to tell the story.
To make sure that data supports the story. Or doesn't. And if it doesn't, what story is really there?
And it has to look for those consensus building moments where the data is aligned and you can point out and say, hey, look, the data is making the argument for you.
Well, I'll bring in another good point about change and change management. I've often observed this. It's easy to change when the conclusion's not foregone. In other words, if we're changing how we interpret something about what's going to happen, what we think is going to happen, it's not a foregone conclusion, okay? There is a degree of uncertainty there. We don't know. We think this is what will happen, but it's still out there. It's not a predetermined thing. Nowhere in Anna's discussion is there any talk about waiting for the monthly financials, waiting for the batch mode to kick in, okay? It's about being a real-time company. It's about real-time information. And so I want everybody to make that shift in your mind. How do we make finance a real-time, forward-looking entity in terms of what's out there? And not just the financial results, but the physical things that are going to create the financial results in the future. The more we understand about that, the better we are at being predictive. The better we get at being predictive, the longer the lead time we have to see things coming, the longer the lead time we have to adjust things if they're not going to turn out the way we want them to. So that's where we're trying to go with FP&A, and the whole episode here really focuses on using that data to help get to a better outcome and where we're trying to go.
Well, that's our episode then, Steve. And speaking of where you want to go, where are you headed? What's going on?
Well, I'm very excited. I'm very excited about it as we head toward the future, Jack. You and I will be together toward the end of October. We'll be in Philadelphia at the AFP's annual conference. I'm going to be working with my great colleague, Naveen White, which is another great woman doing great things. One of the smartest people I've ever worked with. We'll be talking in a panel discussion really about what to stop doing in FP&A. I mean, what do we stop so we, again, create some space and capacity to do the things that are more meaningful, to do the business partnering, to do the forward planning and those kind of things. So we'll be having a good conversation about how to do that. It'll be a roundtable discussion that Brian Lapidus is going to be hosting and moderating, and so we're looking very forward to that in terms of what's up there. Businesses are about knowing where you are and then changing to where you need to be. And so we thought, let's put together some workshops and help train and educate people. If they'll just drop me a line, steve@theplayergroup.com, I'll be happy to get you information on that and love to have everybody join us.
Well, there you have it. For Planning Aces, this is Jack Sweeney with Steve Player. Thank you for listening.